Past lives and past life regression is the topic for today's podcast. My guest is Colleen Lemma, and she specializes in not only past lives, but past lives regression. So I'm going to just turn it over to you, Colleen. How on earth did you start with down the path, first of all, past lives, and then past life regressions? It's like, what is that all about for someone who may not know anything about past lives?
Well, I'm going to try to keep my backstory a little brief, but really, I was born and raised Catholic in a very conservative area of the United States, and at one point in my late 20s, I felt like I was on some sort of spiritual search for something more meaningful from a spiritual perspective. Because I was born and raised in the Catholic religion. It didn't seem to really vibe for me. Nothing wrong with anybody that's Catholic, but just the whole thing, again, it felt like there should be something more. And in that search, I ended up going through a huge transformation and a kind of a physical transition and moving from one area to another, meeting a whole different set of people that were more on the what we might call the metaphysical spiritual path. Yep. And therein, started my spiritual journey into what I do now. And it first started out with, me taking a lot of classes and workshops and different modalities that I was interested in, astrology, numerology, crystals, etc. And at some point in that, I'll call it a healing journey for myself, yep, I was led to take a hypnotherapy course. And that even came about in a divinely guided way, because when I went to university earlier in my life, I got a double major in psychology and social work and minors in counseling and substance abuse, and worked in domestic violence and sexual abuse for many, many years. And there was a period of time where, again, all this transition was taking place and I was taking classes, and I applied to get my master's degree in psychology and kind of move on in that realm. And little did I realize that I was going to be rejected from the university that I was applying to. It never really even dawned on me because my grades were always good. The only thing was it had been a period of years since I had gotten my bachelor's degree. And they said, well, it's been too long and maybe you could dabble and take a class here or there, but we're not going to, we don't want you to take like a full course load right now. So I was kind of devastated because, that's what I knew. And that was my path. That was always my interest, is this psychological kind of, area of life. And someone at that time, it was one of the spiritual teachers that I had taken some other classes with, said, you know what, you'd be perfect to be a hypnotherapist. Like, you should really take this hypnotherapy course. And that's where I ended up going to the Institute for Transformational Hypnotherapy and learning about past life regression and clearing techniques of lower energies and in between lives, and a whole slew of other things. It wasn't just your typical hypnotherapy of substance abuse, anxiety, and depression. This was really delving into the spiritual realm of hypnosis, and one of those things was the past life regression. And with my background already in social work, psychology, domestic violence, all of that, it really was a really good fit. And not only with what I wanted to do in life, if you want to call it a spiritual mission or a destiny path, also for my own healing journey, because of some of the things that I grew up with, because, with the hypnotherapy and past life regression, you can certainly heal a lot of your own challenges, your karmic challenges that you come in with as a soul.
That is so cool. So I've already got some questions for you, Colleen. My introduction, I actually, with past lives, I kind of discovered that by accident. And it was my first open-eyed shock to pot meditation in Southern California. And I was just a kid. I was like 24 at the time. And what happened was it's like the facilitator, she went completely black, or she left the room, if you will. And when she came back, I started seeing all these different faces on her face. And the thing that was so amazing was I began to recognize some of these faces. Like there was a cowboy with like a curled mustache. And I wanted to giggle, but I didn't want to disrupt her either because it looked like my mom. Even though I knew it wasn't my mom, I thought, well, that's my mom, you know. So, and then I saw some different faces that were mine. But one, for example, was Mongolian and one was Italian. And most of them, oddly enough, were men. So, and that's like, well, maybe that's why I was such a tomboy growing up. But that was my first experience of past lives. And then as I developed myself, I was visual. So often I would see those type of things. But what it really started to make sense is I went to a workshop by Brian Weiss, and he had just finished writing the book, and he was doing a book tour on Many Lives, Many Masters. And that's when the whole thing really started to come together for me. And so I guess my question is, did your journey unfold like Brian's as he's working with clients? And then it's like all of a sudden it's like, holy moly, you know, um, let's explore this a little bit, you know, more if you're willing. And I'm also really curious about the in-between lives. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone really kind of mention that in-between state. And I know because we are all just energy. Of course, there's those intervals. So if you don't mind, could you like talk a little bit more about that too?
Sure. I'm going to start with, where you left off and sharing your wonderful experience of, seeing these different faces and what you might have looked like in a past life. My very first experience with my own seeing a past life was in a group kind of format. And it was even before I went, to learn to become a hypnotherapist and someone that does past life regression. I went to a class or a course, and it was about past lives. And so there were many students in the room, and the instructor did a group past life regression. Now, in that group past life regression, of course, because there were so many people there, she just led us to go to a pertinent lifetime, so everybody had a different experience. And where I went, all of a sudden, I saw in my mind's eye these large standing beautiful pyramids. And I looked around to where I was, and I was on some sort of like beach sort of island, if you will. Palm trees, I could see them waving in the breeze. I saw these large standing pyramids kind of off in the distance. I saw crystal points on the top of the pyramid. And as I was there, the instructor asked us to go ahead and look at our feet, look at our hands, look at our feet. And so in that vision, I looked down at my hands and my feet, and I had brown skin, like I had darker complected skin. And then she led us in that past life regression to go and find something that would reflect back to us what we look like. Like we could look in the water, a mirror, or, a pool or something. And I ended up being guided to this room, a structure. And as I walked in, first of all, there were like crystals from ceiling to floor and on, all over the place, just beautiful, beautiful crystals. And then I saw a mirror on the wall. So I walked up to the mirror and I looked in the mirror, and I had a boy's face. I was probably like maybe 14, a 14-year-old boy, like black hair, pretty much, dark eyes, and again, this dark skin. And, it was really quite the amazing experience to have for a first time, experience. And I I never even considered myself clairvoyant. You clearly are clairvoyant with seeing a lot of the things that you see, but that was definitely something very clear to me. And it also was made clear as we went on in that group hypnosis that I was in Lemuria. So, again, a wonderful kind of experience of being in this, in this lost continent of Lemuria lifetime where I was this young boy. And obviously crystals, stood out. And I do love and work with crystals in my healing work as well. So they, showed that to me in that vision.
That's so interesting. So how does that translate today? Like when a client comes to see you, Colleen, how I know how I assess my clients when they first come to see me. What would it look like if I was coming to see you for the first time? It's like, how do you use your all the different modalities in your training? Most certainly.
Well, sometimes, clients already know what they want to experience, like say, for instance, what are some different ways to access, past lives? And there's more than what you think, there's more than just having a past life regression. There's the astrological birth chart that can tune you into past lives. There's the numerological chart, if you will, that can tune you in. Paying attention to your dreams in your dream time. You often will have dreams where you know that this is you in the dream, but you're like, I don't look the same, but I know it's me. Or upon waking up, you just have a realization that that was you. And that is your higher soul self showing you perhaps a different lifetime that you had through your dreams. There's the Akashic records. I also took a training with the Akashic records. You can also tap into people's past lives, among many other things, as far as spiritual healing for the soul through that. And then, of course, then we come to the hypnosis and past lives. So, there's various ways. And so when a client comes to me, sometimes they already know what they want to experience. Maybe they want an intuitive reading using, some of these other tools I mentioned, or maybe they do, in fact, want to do a past life regression. So, if they have questions, I'll answer them. They may say, well, what can I learn from going into hypnosis, with you as a guide? And again, we can do anything from anxiety, depression, to, again, exploring a past life. Sometimes they want to know how that can help. Sometimes they want to just do it for the sheer experience of tapping into a past life. But a lot of times, and the reason why we reincarnate, is, from my perspective anyway, I'm sure a lot of people have different ways of looking at reincarnation, and some people don't believe in it at all, which is totally fine. But with the lifetimes that we lived, we are learning certain experiences. We're here on a soul journey, learning something. And from my belief system and viewpoint, we choose the lessons in this particular lifetime that we want to learn, that we want to experience. And we choose a lot of the people that we're going to meet in this particular lifetime that's going to help us to move through on this spiritual journey. So with this, I'll answer all of their questions basically. And as we, set the session up, probably the first hour or so is going through, like a form basically, where I'm asking them a lot of questions, because it'll help us to zero in on what exactly are we going to explore. What does the client want to explore? Maybe there's relationship patterns, or maybe there's a poverty consciousness, or maybe there's family issues. And a lot of these from previous lifetime incarnations are something that sometimes repeat over and over again. And it repeats in your current incarnation over and over again. So you know that there's some important theme here that needs to be explored. So we zone in through these questions to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Spirit talks to me as I'm talking to the client. I'm listening to my guides. I'm listening to their guides. And ultimately, it's up to the client in the end, what it is they want to do and what they want to explore. But I can certainly give them some guidance as to what I'm hearing or sensing as well that might be particularly important for them to consider as far as that type of a healing session. And I don't remember what your second question was.
That's okay. What really came to mind is how important free will is. And I know that just working with clients in general, I may have an idea of, oh, they need to work on A, B, and C. Then I'll do some energetic testing or after talking to them. And it's like, clearly that's not what's presenting itself. So
Right.
I totally understand the whole idea behind free will. Um, how I'm curious to know how, once someone gets an idea that, let's say they have habits or patterns that have been less than fruitful for them, that they may want to change, or they need, like they date the same person. It may be like a different body, but it's like the personalities are all the same. How do they come back, and do you continue to work with them to help them break out of those many lifetimes, maybe, of the patterns, so that they don't have to repeat this particular thing?
That's a good question. And, sometimes we can do a lot of clearing and healing in one session, and then other times it's going to take multiple sessions. For instance, one of my first clients that came in did have a anxiety issue, and she was on many anxiety meds, right? And we did some hypnosis. She tapped into a past life. She found out where the source of the anxiety came from. We cleared it, released it, transmuted it through that hypnosis session. And she actually became one of my best friends over the years after that. But she never needed those anti-anxiety medications again. Like, just one session just kind of cleared it out, but she was ready for it. And that's part of it too. It's like, how ready is the person to heal this? And what are the layers? Like, my client who became my friend, um, it was one particular lifetime where there was a source of it. Whereas when you get to things like family dynamics or relationship issues, or maybe even addiction issues or other things, there might be multiple lifetimes and multiple layers that have to be gone through and healed to be able to finally balance that out in this lifetime. So everybody, it's an individual kind of process, and there's no set answer to that as far as how long will it take. And I also want to make mention too, just for some of those that may be listening, is the process of hypnosis or past life regression. You're not unconscious. You're not in the state like, oh, I can't move, and oh, I don't remember what's going on. Like, I'm coming out of the hypnosis and I have no clue what happened. That's usually and typically not how it goes. This is just a process, a healing process, where we put your conscious mind on the back burner. We let your conscious mind take the back seat of the car, and we ask the subconscious mind to come forward into the driver's seat of the car, so to speak. And you are still aware of what's going on around you. If you really wanted to zone in on it, you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. You hear my voice, you know what's going on. And at any point during that hypnosis or past life regression process, you felt like you didn't want to do it anymore for whatever reason, you could just open your eyes, sit up, and say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And which is totally fine, right? We're going to respect where the soul is and what the soul wants to experience. But I just want people to know that it's not typical that, you have no control over your body, mind, or energy field at this point. Now, some people will, with that being said, fall asleep during a hypnosis process because you're so relaxed. And, in that case, again, no harm, right? Your higher soul self is always with you and is always protecting you, as is your angels and guides. So there's not going to be any harm to you whatsoever.
That's been my experience when I work on a client. If they start snoring, for me, I know I'm on the right track, because they're on some level, they're really healing. What's the most memorable client that you worked with that either triggered or you may not have experienced this, but that either triggered like one of your own past lives or kind of given you the idea of we must have journeyed together. In other words, there was like no accident that this person came to see you, almost like they had been sent to help you as opposed to you helping them. The reason why I'm asking is I've had a few of those clients come in and it's like, oh, thank you, because I needed them, I think, more than they needed me at the time. For whatever reason, it was kind of like a divine appointment. Have you
Right.
had any of those experiences?
You know, I have those kind of feelings all the time, but not just with the hypnosis or past life regression I do. When I do readings for people, intuitive readings, I have that all the time where what I'm going through in my life, those are the type of clients that I'm drawing to me. Those are the type of questions, you know, that they're asking or the type of healing that they're looking for. And, you know, there's been many experiences of that, but to slightly adjust what you're asking, because not one pertinent thing in exactly the way you're asking it comes to mind. I would like to share my first one-on-one hypnosis experience that I had. And that is where I was led to go into a hypnotic state, obviously is what we call it. And let me give you a little bit of background in my present lifetime first. As in this lifetime, I have or had an alcoholic abusive father. He's passed now to the other side. But this was more than 20 years ago that I had my first one-on-one hypnosis session for myself. And the person that led and guided me, you know, led me to a time and a place that was pertinent to my now life. I don't know that it was any more specific to that. It was just like, go to a time and place that's significant for you in your healing journey. And then she started asking me questions, you know, what are you wearing? How old are you? Are you male or female? And I was a 4 or 5 year old female girl. And what surprised me was that I could describe the clothing I was wearing, a little dress, white stockings, those little black strap shoes or whatever. I don't even know what time era that was from, maybe the 20s or 30s or 40s or something. And she said, then, is anybody around you? And I, you know, looked around in my state of beingness, and I said that my father was there. And she said, and where's your mom? And I said, you know, I kind of whimpered this little 4 year old or 5 year old childlike voice. I said, she's not here. She's not here anymore. And the person guiding the hypnosis asked me what happened next. And I paused for a few seconds. I started to cry. And, you know, I said to her that I got pushed by my father in an angry rage that he was in. And I fell down a flight of stairs and I broke my neck and I died. And I know that's a pretty heavy kind of thing to go through. And at the time I was going through all of this, in the beginning, like in my head, I'm questioning everything, right? Because this is my very first experience. I'm like, oh, I could be making up what I'm wearing. I could be making up how old I am and that I'm a little girl. I could be making all this up. But when I came out of the experience, I realized that I could have been making some of those other details up, but there's no way I was making up crying uncontrollably, which I ended up doing in the session because of what occurred with my father in that lifetime. And so then I knew it was real. Like I knew something real was happening here. And the link to my present lifetime is because in that lifetime, my father was an alcoholic, abusive man. In this lifetime, he was an alcoholic and abusive man. And we did confirm during that past life regression that it was the same soul, that we were in the same roles in this lifetime that we were in that lifetime. And that's because I ended up dying at such an early and young age, and we didn't have time to clear out any karma from previous times. And so that to me sticks out as one of the most, you know, prominent situations of a past life regression. And like I said, I've had many, many others with many, many clients, but that definitely stands out as one.
That's amazing. So how do you console your client when they have the same kind of experience that you just described? It's like, how do you bring them back into a state of peace?
Hmm. Well, a lot of times if the client is fearful before they even go into it, because they might, already know that we're dealing with this kind of an issue, and the issue at hand might be a little bit sensitive, okay?
Right. Mhm.
So in that case, I start out right from the beginning of the hypnosis by speaking to their subconscious once they get into that relaxed hypnotic state. And I let them know that this is going to be something that you're viewing like you're at the movie theater. This is going to be not something that you're feeling emotionally or physically, but that you're just viewing from a different kind of perspective. So it is just like watching a movie, even though that's you down there, and this is what's happening in this particular lifetime. We're removing the trauma of it while you're viewing it. And then we can talk again with subconscious, and actually I talk with physical body, and I also talk with higher soul self, and we talk to all these different aspects of the person, the client,
Mhm.
in order to bring about the best kind of healing for them. Now, if it did happen that we didn't do that because we didn't think that there was going to be anything like hugely challenging coming up, but then it did, then I would just gently ask them to connect with their higher self and to allow their higher self to like rise above the surface of what's going on and let the higher self kind of remove them from the trauma and the challenge of what's being experienced. I would call in their angels and guides, maybe Archangel Raphael, for comfort and healing. So there's definitely techniques that are utilized or can be utilized to make sure that the client, finds a sense of peace and like disconnect from the trauma of the scene, even though we're still going to deal with and remove or transmute or heal the trauma with some sort of technique.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it really sounds like it creates a nice, safe environment for the person.
Absolutely. In fact, we call in all the angels and guides before we, even start, as we're just relaxing the body and relaxing the mind, starting to get into that state. I already call in all of those yeah, angels or ascended masters or your ancestors of the light or whatever it is that, that
Right.
whatever your belief system is.
So I'm curious. I've been watching on Gaia and some of the other places that I like to learn. Um, there's a lot right now. This is going to be totally off the wall. Right now, there's a lot of talk about celestial beings that have been on the earth like forever and are now becoming more well known. Have you ever encountered someone or like a light being or for lack of a more common term, like an alien that may be with someone, or a person may be a hybrid or something along those lines? And if you have, it's like, did the person kind of have an idea that they were unique in some way, or how do you navigate something like that with one of your clients?
Well, again, we want to stay within the client's comfort zone, but
Right,
sometimes, yeah, sometimes things come in that will surprise them, and they might witness it while they're in the state, and they're like, "Oh, this beautiful being is, walking up to me, and they're wearing this, and they're glowing, and whatever it might be." Sometimes I'll get a sense, with the intuitive gifts that I have,
right,
where I sense that there's a being that's there. And I may or may not mention that to the person because I don't know how they might take that. So I have to kind of just,
right.
tread carefully with that as well. But yeah, that kind of stuff just happens all the time for sure. And sometimes, their loved ones from the other side might pop in, for kind of comfort or whatnot. There was one other thing that pops into my mind as a client that it was a man. He always came to me to connect with, what do I want to say? Like that those higher realms, those higher, and he was definitely of the otherworldly sort. Let's just put it that way.
Right, right.
So he always wanted to connect it with higher self, and he then would do a lot of channeling in the state of hypnosis from his higher self. And I would kind of, take down notes. He would give me questions ahead of time that he wanted to ask his higher self.
Oh, that's cool.
And I would then ask those questions. And, at the time, it was old school. So we were recording on cassette tapes back then and, giving that to the client. Of course, you can't, do that anymore, really. But all sorts of interesting things happen and can happen, in a good way,
Right.
with hypnosis, past life regression, in between lives you had mentioned earlier, where, when the soul passes from this human existence, it leaves this physical body, before it incarnates again, is that in between time, right? It doesn't just leave the body and incarnate right away, or sometimes it might, but again, that's a soul choice.
Right.
But in those in between lives, state of being, a lot of times they're meeting with their spiritual team, they're meeting with guides that are asking them, well, what did you learn in this lifetime? Where do you think you might have been able to do better? There's no judgment in that in-between state. There's only unconditional love and compassion, but it's a learning process, just like we are here in this physical body. And part of why we incarnate or reincarnate is, again, clearing karma, learning from experience, learning certain things, growing, evolving, it's this journey kind of back to wholeness,
Right.
or rediscovering our divinity, our knowingness that we are just unconditional love, that we're part of the source, we're part of the divine. So, again, that in-between state, it's just as much learning there as it is here on this physical plane.
That's so cool. Well, Colleen, how does someone get a hold of you if they want to work? You also work online, correct?
Most of what I do, I'd have to say 99% of what I do is on Zoom, telephone,
Cool.
the work that I do. I have a home office rather than an out of the home office at this time. It doesn't mean that that won't change, but it's just because I've moved so much in the last 6 years. I've been in
Yes.
3 different states. So how they can get a hold of me or look at what services I have to offer and whatnot is simply going to my website, which is sacredsoulempowerment.com. That's all one word, sacredsoulempowerment.com. And I also have Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sacred Soul Empowerment, as well as my name, Colleen Lemma. And my YouTube channel is under my name, Colleen Lemma, where I do free weekly and monthly intuitive readings for the collective. If you want to, check that out, check out my style of reading. So those would be the main ways that you can find me.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you. You are so amazing, and I really enjoyed speaking with you. So if anyone is watching that is interested, please contact Colleen for a reading or for guidance as to what you should do next. This is Soulful Conversations, and I'm Lizz Naughton. Thank you so much, Colleen, and until we meet again, namaste.
Thank you, Lizz.
You're welcome.